All right, Shabbos, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tafshin Pei Hey, the Tilsa Mishpacha, for dedicating all the Shuman and Joshos this year as a zechus for Besoros Tovos for all of Am Yisrael. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Stephen Terry Zinn, in honor of the birth of their granddaughter Devorah Eliana Zinn, and a commemoration of the yard site of Bunim Tzvi Ben Chaim. Shmuel and Rabbi Karapkin, and the schos for Fushlam for Rabbi's cousin serving in the IDF B'Yom Pesach. B'Yom Chaim Pesach Ben Moshe Chana, and a creation of the yard site of Pesa Mira Bas Chaim, Dr. Moshe and Ellen Gevant, in memory of Dr. Gevant's parents, Yaakov Meir Ben Moshe Leib and Shena Bas Abba. Our week of learning sponsors, Judy Posner, in memory of Shimshon Laser Ben Moshe Chaim Ben Eliyahu Cohen, Daniel Yehuda Ben Shimshon Laser, and Leah Soul in memory of Selma Wolf. May our memory be an inspiration for us all. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, all of those who need a refuah shleima to have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael, Kadosh Baruch Hu should bear Hashem return our hostages, b'shalom and b'karov, and should allow our holy soldiers to be successful. B'chol ma'asei yedehem. But with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Kuf Mem Aleph 141. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on the bottom of Kuf Mem. 2 lines up from the bottom. 140b. Meisvei. So let's remember again. Yesterday we ended off with the fascinating and riveting discussion about tumtum. More specifically, halachically, what category does a tumtum fit into? So we seem to have a fundamental machlokes. One group says, one school of thought says that Allah so tumtum is safek ish, safek isha. Maybe it's a man, maybe it's a woman, and we're not sure again just what the gender is, and therefore Allah essentially you give it the chumras and the kulas. Now remember again, we're dealing over here with Hilchos Yerusha. So as you've seen in Hilchos Yerusha, the sons could say, hey, you don't inherit with us, you're a daughter. The daughters could say, you don't inherit with us, you're a son. And then there's the position of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that halacha l'maisa tumtum is a beria bifnei atzma. It's in its own category. It's in its own category. It's not male, it's not female. It has its own halachic designation. Now, again, remember, I will say, obviously, the difference of the tumtum is that if that membrane is opened up, then obviously the gender, that's the gender reveal, so to speak. In other words, even Rabbi Shmuel Gamliel says it's only in a category unto itself before you've been physically been mevarer. But once you're physically clarified, then of course fits into a particular category. So the Gemara says as follows: Meisvei, tumtum yorish keben v'nizon kibas. So the Brisa says over here that a tumtum inherits like a son, but yet it receives mizonos like a daughter. So the Gemara says, okay, let's analyze this. Bishlam al Rava. So according to Rava, remember again, Rava was the one who said that in Mishnah Dochin Osa v'yeshlo, the sons could go ahead and push the tumtum to the daughters, and the tumtum will in fact inherit like a daughter. Because also remember again, from a financial perspective, a tumtum will at least be entitled to mizonos. Right, because again, he's a safek ish, safek isha, so he has the right at least to the most basic financial entitlement. So bishlam al Rav, Yorish, so Gemara says bishlam al Rava, Yorish kibem b'nechasim mu'atin, v'nizon kibas b'nechasim mu'ruben, that a tumtum will inherit like a son with nechasim mu'atin. Now, what does that mean to inherit like a son with nechasim mu'atin? What does that mean? What do you get? Nothing. Nothing, right? So again, if it's nechasim mu'atin, so he'll be like a son, meaning he'll get nothing. And halacha l'maisa again, if it's and yorish kibas b'nechasim merubin, and he'll be like a daughter when it comes to nechasim merubin. What does a daughter get by nechasim merubin? She gets mizonos. She gets mizonos. So that makes a lot of sense. Remember again, because according to Rava holds that halacha l'maisa, number one, tumtum is safek ish, safek isha, and number two, that a tumtum, the sons could push him to the daughter, and when they push him to the daughters, he inherits like a daughter. He's entitled to whatever is the lowest financial entitlement from the inheritance. Ella, top of Kuf Mem Aleph 141a. Ella la Abaye, my nizon kibas. But according to Abaye, ultimately, what does it mean? Remember, I will say Abaye was the one who said that dochin also ve'imlo, that the sons could go ahead and push him to the daughters, but at the end of the day he doesn't inherit like a daughter, because in other words, essentially he could be ping-ponged. In other words, the sons could send him to the daughters could say you like the sons, so essentially he's just pushed back and forth between siblings, and he really doesn't get anything. But even according to Rava, what does it mean that ultimately, again, he's Yorish Kiben? In other words, that's a strong statement. He's not Yorish Kiben. He's not Yorish Kiben. elo roi liyaresh ve'enlo. Rather, what it means is that technically speaking, he's entitled to, but he doesn't actually collect. Hachanami roi lozon ve'enlo. So too over here, you could say by Abaye, it means technically speaking, he may be entitled to mazonos, but at the end of the day, he would be unable to collect. Okay. So we'll say, so therefore, halacha l'maisa, the way we end off with this tumtum sugya is essentially with our suffix. That's it. It's a machlokes. This is not. In other words, the Gemara's job over here is not to even try to resolve this machlokes. It's not trying to resolve it. We're just trying to highlight it, and therefore go ahead and discuss how it applies halacha l'maisa by Yerusha. And I both say now the way we paskin over here, the way the Rambam paskins. So like tachlis. What do you do with the tumtum by Yerusha? So let's say again, Yaakov has two sons, Reuven and Shimon, right? Two daughters, Rachel and Leah, and a tumtum. So now Yaakov dies, he leaves behind the estate. So what is the halacha? What is the halacha? So the Rambam ends up paskening like Rava, that essentially the tumtum will get the lowest denomination of inheritance. So again, depending on what the estate is. So if it's nechasim mu'atin, he literally again will be like a son and he'll get nothing. And if it's nechasim merubin, he'll be like a daughter and he'll get mazonos. That's how we do it. Fine. Shavuot says halacha is fine. So that's that. So let's go back to the Mishnah. That's the end of the tumtum sugya. Says the Gemara, Ha'omer in yalda ishti zachar. So the next case in the Mishnah was this. Again, we'll discuss this case because there are actually a lot of intricacies in this case. But the case was as follows: a man says, if my wife gives birth. So again, if my wife gives birth to a boy, she'll get a mana, right? Or gives birth to a girl, she'll get 200 zuz. So what the Gemara is going to pick up now, again, most basically what's intriguing about that case is it appears that a father is assigning a gift to an unborn child. So we're going to deal with that on Amud Beis, because actually we've referenced that this week already, so we'll come back to that. But what's first catching the attention of the Gemara is this idea that halacha l'maisa, a girl gets a larger gift than a boy, right? In the example of the Mishnah, so a father is saying, if my daughter goes ahead and if my wife gives birth to a daughter, it's 100 zuz. If she gives birth to a boy, it's 100 zuz. If she gives birth to a daughter, it's 200 zuz. So what's the pshat? In other words, why is it that a girl is getting a higher financial gift? So the memra, the bas adif alemi bein. Is that to say that having a daughter is better than having a son? In other words, again, we are associating the higher financial gift with the idea that it is better to have that gender of a child. So the fact that the father is assigning a higher financial gift to a daughter, does that say that having a daughter is better than having a son? It's incredible. Kol she'enu maniach ben liyarsho, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mali alav evra. Whoever does not leave behind a son to inherit him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is filled with wrath about such a person. Now, strange Gemara just from the outset, but let's at least finish reading it. Shneimar, where do you get that from? Shneimar, v'ha'avartem es nachalaso lebito. So we've spoken about this before, that the lashon of the Torah, when it comes to a daughter of inheriting, is va'avartem. Literally, again, you'll transfer over. Why does the Torah use that lashon? Because if my daughter inherits me, then there is a very strong possibility that that property is going to leave my tribal designation and obviously go to whoever it is that she is going to marry. So the Gemara says as follows: "Va'avartem es nachalos lebito ve'ein ha'avara ela evra." A little bit of a play on words. So avara doesn't just mean to pass over or to transfer, but the lashon of evra is also a lashon of anger. Shneimar yom evra hayom. Quotes over here the pasuk from Tzafanya, Yom Evrayom. Today is a day of anger. So I will say, so this is just a fascinating Gemara. So on one hand, the Mishnah makes it sound like it's better to have a girl because the higher financial amount is associated with a girl. Yet the Gemara says that if you don't leave behind a son to inherit you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is filled with wrath. I will say, so first of all, the Gemara itself is a strange Gemara. How can HaKadosh Baruch Hu be filled with wrath if I don't leave behind the son? Whether or not I have a son is not up to me, right? Whether or not a person has children is not up to him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides that. And certainly, again, the gender of the child, that's not up to me. So how could HaKadosh Baruch Hu be filled with wrath over the fact that I didn't leave behind the son? So I will say, so it's interesting. If you notice, by the way, so it could very well be that on a most basic level, the challenge, of course, the inheritance issue with just leaving behind a daughter is that halacha l'maisa now tribal property is transferred over. What is the, so to speak, the key attribute of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's Seder, right? The Ribono Shel Olam has a Seder for everything. Interestingly enough, when a person doesn't leave behind a son but has a daughter, like lahavdil, the Seder is disrupted a little bit. Now, obviously, that's part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Seder also. But Lamaisa, the Seder is disrupted, right? The property is going to move in a different direction. So that's one possibility. The other possibility that's brought down, I saw this quoted actually in the name of in the name of a number of the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov. There is this concept that Ben doesn't just represent son. There's more on a hashkafic level, more than on a halachic level. Ben doesn't represent son. What does Ben represent? Ben represents your spiritual offspring. The idea being, Ben represents the actions that you perform that outlive you. The things that you do in this world, even that go on, even when you are no longer here. So what is the metric of a meaningful life? The metric of a meaningful life is, if I die, and that's it. Like, it's over. There's no legacy. I haven't changed the world in any way that outlives me. But when I die, my influence is done, my life is done, and that's it. Okay, it was a very nice chapter while it lasted, but there's no lasting imprint. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is frustrated by a person who lives a life like that. So the Sfarim bring down, Kol she'eno maniach ben liyarsho. What's a ben? A ben means life results. A ben means life realities. Whoever does not leave behind the son, the same way that a son carries on the legacy of a father, a person has to live a life. So that, say, think about this. If I were to leave this world today, what would be left of me? What's the vestige, right? What am I leaving behind? What's my legacy? What is it that's going to outlive me in this world? And if I can't point to anything like that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was frustrated at a life like that, at a life that is, forgive me, so shallow that the only impact it had is while I was here in this world, but the moment that I'm gone, my influence, right, and my impact goes with me. A person has to leave a ben. A ben doesn't have to be an actual son, because again, a person can't control whether or not they leave behind offspring or the gender of those offspring. But a person absolutely controls the legacy they leave behind, which is a reflection of the life I lived in this world. Work hard in this life so that when it comes to an end, there is something left over that outlives you. And by the way, I will say, it's not just enough even to say, I left behind children. Okay, shkayach, I left behind children. That's nice. That's beautiful, but it's got to be some. What kind of children? What kind of children? What kind of mishpacha? What kind of legacy? That's your ben. If when life comes to an end, my influence comes to an end, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is filled with anger over such a life. The Gemara says, so how do you reconcile this, right? So again, let's go back to the Gemara. So how do you reconcile this, right? Because on one hand, the Gemara said, by the way, it's also interesting to point out that who is the author of this statement? Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yochai. Right? Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yochai, his primary Talmud was his son, Rebbe Lazar. Right, Rabbi Lazar, remember again, that father-son bond forged in the cave of solitude was a tremendous, tremendous bond. And Rabbi Lazar was absolutely the extension of his father and the perpetuator of his father's life work. So it's fascinating to see that as well. What would Rashbi be without a Rabbi Lazar? What would he be without that extension? Anyway, so the Gemara says, so how do you reconcile this? Because on one hand, the Mishnah seems to indicate that having a girl is better. On the other hand, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yochai says, if you don't leave behind the son to inherit you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is filled with wrath. So how do you explain it? Hahu le'inyan, the Gemara says, Hahu le'inyan Yerusha, I'm sorry. Le'in Yerusha, that's the Yamahu. Le'in Yerusha ben adifle, le'in harvacha bita adifle. Very simple distinction. When it comes to actual inheritance, of course, a son is better, right? Why? Just on a basic level, nothing to do with the quality of a son versus a daughter, but based on halacha. The halacha says a son is of the same tribe as the father. So when I leave behind the son to inherit me, my property stays with my name, in my tribe, and in my family, as opposed to a daughter who often could take that property again to a different tribal designation. On the other hand, li'in harvacha. Harvacha means support. Harvacha means support. And when it comes to support, a father would rather support his daughter than he would support his son. In other words, when it comes to a son, a father's like, good job. In other words, that go take care of yourself, right? Get yourself together, you're capable and you're able. A father, by definition, has a more nurturing posture towards a daughter than he has a son. So therefore, in the Mishnah, when we're talking about assigning a gift, who is a father going to give a bigger gift to? He's going to give a bigger gift to his daughter more than he's going to go ahead and give to his son. Beautiful, beautiful. Shmuel says, Hacha, over here, what are we talking about over here? B'mevakeres askinon. So we'll say this is really a beautiful Gemara as well. What are we talking about over here? We're talking about so let's call it, Reuven's married to Rachel, and they're having their first child. Their first child, Melakaris means her first birth. She's giving birth to her first child. And therefore again, and what's happening? So now you can appreciate this just a little bit more. So Reuven is excited about the birth of his first child. So what does he say? If it's a boy, I'm going to give him 100 zuz. And if it's a girl, I'm going to give her 200 zuz. So what's the pshat? So once again, why does a girl get a higher gift, right? A larger gift than a son? Okay, Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda is beautiful. Bas trila simin yafa lebanim. Having a daughter first, having a firstborn daughter, ultimately, again, is a beautiful siman for sons, for the family. Now, what does that mean? Ike da amri de marbi alacha. So some say we know this. Anyone who has a firstborn daughter knows this to be absolutely true. A firstborn daughter becomes a second mother. So therefore, again, to start your family with a daughter is a tremendous bracha for the rest of the family, because again, a person has another set of hands. Literally, a person has another maternal influence within the home. Others say, because halacha l'maisa, where there is a daughter, the family won't have an ayin hara. Family won't have an ayin hara. So I will say, so what does this mean? So I want to share with you something absolutely amazing. The Marsha, I just want to quote you the Marsha. What does it mean if you have a firstborn daughter? So you're not going to have ayin hara in the house? So the Marsha says, get ready for this. Yesh lomar, de le'inyan b'chora ka'amar. Having a firstborn daughter is beneficial vis-a-vis inheritance. How so? So kishetiyah habas tchila lo yiyeh b'char ben ha'achim v'tar b'chilek ha'achin. Aval kishiyeh ben tchila hu mema'it chilek shar kol ha'achin v'hainu lo shalta ba'in abisha d'shiyeh lo ben tchila v'notal pishnayim hakol nosnin bo ayin hara. So I will say, this is incredible. It is incredible to see how, and the beauty of Yiddishkeit, the beauty of Gemara, is how we speak about these concepts as an abstract and then there's like a real life application. The Gemara says, we're speaking so much over here about the Bechar, getting Pishnayim. Sounds beautiful, right? You can't go ahead and deviate that. All these things. And then the Gemara says, yeah, by the way, but you know what? Having a girl first is really good. You know why? There's no Bechar. You know why it's good that there's no Bechar? Because everyone, or at least the sons, all inherit equally. Because when one son gets more than everyone else, even in the best of families, it creates tension. That's the ayin hara, the Gemara says. The Marsha says that when Bechar brother gets pishnayim and the other brothers get less, they're going to look at him begrudgingly. And when you look at someone begrudgingly, that's called ayin hara. So this is so beautiful. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, Bas tchilas im yofa lebanim, can either be a practical idea that halacha l'maisa, again, having a daughter first gives the family like a second mother, or again, on a hashkafic level, there won't be any ayin hara. There's not going to be any discord. Not any discord. There won't be any financial discord or pishnayim discord, because there is no firstborn brother. Therefore, no one's going to look begrudgingly upon one sibling who gets more than the others. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Amra papa uledidi bansan adifan la mi benai. Rav Chisda says, I just want to tell you, for me, I prefer daughters over sons. Which, by the way, is so fascinating to hear these statements. So it happens to say, interestingly enough, there's an interesting machlokes over here between Rashi and Tosas. So Rashi says over here, it's like it's a little bit further up on the column in this short lines, about 10 lines in. So again, so the Rashbam says over here that Rav Chisda unfortunately lost a number of sons, but his daughters survived. So that says that Rashbam kind of informed this statement that I prefer daughters over sons. Tosas, if you look at Tosas is towards the bottom of the page, about 10 lines up. Tosas says Lididi Bansan Adifan Limi Banai. So Tosas quotes Rashi, or the Rashbam, and Tosas says it doesn't make any sense. Rav Chisda had a lot of sons who survived, and again the Rashbam goes through all of his sons. Rav Chisda had a lot of sons. Who were they? Rav Nachman Bar Chana, Mar Yenuka, Mar Kashisha. So again, Rav Chisda had many sons. What do you mean he didn't have sons who survived? This pasha not true. So what does it mean? Says Tosas, when Rav Chisda preferred daughters over sons, Aval Nira L'Ri to Lahachi Kamar, Bansan Adif Limimne Lefisha Hayu Chasanav Gidole Hadar. So this is beautiful. What his daughters brought to the table were great sons-in-law. We're great sons-in-law, and he loved his sons-in-law so much. It's really beautiful. I don't know what this does to family dynamic, statements like this, but it's beautiful to see it, that he loved his sons-in-law so much. His sons-in-law were such Gidolei Hadar that literally he said, "I prefer my daughters over my sons." Okay, so therefore Rav Chisda said, I prefer my daughters over my sons. Also, it is interesting, by the way, there's always this tension. So you see it, by the way, right? All the time, like in the stories in Chumash and in Gemara, that people favor children. Like, in other words, you see statements like this, like they did it. Even though Chazal tell us, Le'olam al yishana adam banim ben abanim. Person should never favor one son over the others. The Raya, of course, that is Yaakov Avinu, what happened with Yosef and the brothers. But yet, it's almost like fascinating to see that but yet Rav Chisda says, daughters are better than sons. And again, Tosas, because his sons-in-law was so great. Now again, it doesn't mean that he loved his sons any less. It's almost as if what he's saying is like this. Sons are your family, that's what it is. Daughters offer you the opportunity to branch into other families, right? Daughters offer you the opportunity to go ahead and bring other branches, beautiful branches of Klal Yisrael, and kind of graft them onto your familial tree. Beautiful. All right, let's go back to the other possibility is, so what's the other possibility? In other words, remember, we're still just trying to reconcile the Mishnah. In the Mishnah's case, there's a higher dollar amount associated with the birth of a girl than the birth of a boy, which seems to be that the Mishnah is favoring the birth of a girl over the birth of a boy. So what's going on over here? The other possibility is Haman Rabbi Huda. The other possibility is Rabbi Huda. Say, hey Rabbi Huda, which Rabbi Huda? Rabbi Huda, the Bakol. Both is incredible, by the way. These are in Yonei Diyam. It's Parshas Chayisar. This here we go. Disanya Vashem Birachis Avraham Bakol. Hashem blessed Avram with everything. So remember again, this is Parshas Chayisara after the death of Sarah Imenu. Avram Zakin Baba Yamim Vashem Berachas Avram Akol. Avram was old. Hashem blessed him with everything. So what does it mean everything? Here we go. Re'emir Omer Shalohaya Labas. What does it mean that Hashem blessed Avram with everything? Everything means he didn't have a daughter. Rabbi Huda says, Shai Salabas. No, he had a daughter. That's what it means, Bakol. Bakol Shema. And her name was Bakol. Avram Avinu named his daughter Bakol. Right, showing you that with the birth of this daughter, he mamish felt like he had everything. He had everything. So perhaps the Mishnah reflects of Rabbi Huda that a daughter is Bakol. Ema Deshamis Rabbi Huda Barta. I'm sorry. Ema Deshamis Rabbi Huda Barta Nami Lochasa Rachmanu Avram Dadifa Miben Mishamis. So first of all you see from there is that ultimately again that Avram Avinu calls her Bakol because Avram Avinu was showing I have everything. I have a son. I have a daughter. I have everything. That doesn't necessarily indicate to us that halacha l'maisa having a daughter is better than having a son. See, I'll just tell you something amazing. So you have this machlokes, right? So one opinion says, first opinion of Rabbi Meir, that Bakol means Avram Avinu didn't have a daughter. And therefore, thank you Hashem for blessing me with everything, and I didn't have a daughter. Rav Shamshon Hirsch asks, on Chumash asks, what does that mean? What does it mean? Avram Avinu is saying, Torah saying he's blessed with everything because he doesn't have a daughter? I mean, again, you want to say that a son is better than having a daughter is better than having a son, but to say that when he says he was blessed with everything that he didn't, that means that he didn't have a daughter. So Rav Hirsch says something amazing. Rav Hirsch says for Avraham Avinu, according to Rav Meir, was a bracha not to have a daughter. Why? Because if Avraham Avinu had a daughter, he would have had to marry her off to someone. Who was he going to marry her off to? It was going to have to be to someone from one of the idolatrous families. You'll say, but he had the same problem with Yitzchak. He knew within his family, again, there was chesed, and the women in his family would be baalei chesed. Avraham Avinu knew that there would be no suitable marriage partner for a daughter. And therefore it says Rabbi Meir HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him a tremendous bracha that he didn't have a daughter. This way, again, he would not have to deal with the issue of finding a proper and suitable mate for her in marriage. Incredible insight. Anyway, and the Gemara says, Elaha Rabbi Huda. So remember again, we have a very simple Mishnah over here. We're just trying to figure out whose opinion is reflected in the Mishnah that says that having a girl is better than having a boy. Elaha Rabbi Huda. It's this Rabbi Huda. This sign here we go. Mitzvah lozon sabanos. It is a mitzvah to support one's daughters. The kavachomer lebanim da aski betar de Rabbi Meir. And all the more so for sons who are engaged in Talmud Torah. These words are Rabbi Meir. Okay, so again, Rabbi Meir says you should support your daughters, but if you support your daughters, even more you should support your sons, because your sons are learning Torah. Rabbi Huda says, mitzvah lazon esabanim, the kavachomer lebanos, the lo lislan. Rabbi Huda says, no. It is good to support your sons, because Baruch Hashem, your sons right are learning Torah, and all the more so you should support your daughters in order to maintain their dignity. So you see over here that Rabbi Huda puts support of the daughter on an even higher pedestal than support of a son. Okay? What about the following statement? Yolda Zachar Unekeva Hazachar Notel Shisha Dinar Vanekeva Noteles Shnei Dinarin. So b'mai. So what about the following brisa? Right, the person. Right, we don't know what this case is, but we'll just read it for now. A woman gives birth to a Zachar Nekeva. So Zachar, if it's a boy, Notel Shisha Dinar. She gets, or right, either she or the baby. We'll go with the baby gets 6 dinar. Vanekeva Noteles Shnei Dinarin. And a Nekeva gets 2, which here indicates that what? Here in this case, the Nekeva, the girl, is getting less than the boy, which would seem to be that the birth of the boy is better than the birth of the girl. To which the Gemara says, B'mai, what is it? What case is this? Amar Rashi, Amrisa l'shmaita kamed Rav Kahana b'misaris. The Amar Zachar Tchilam Asayim Nekeva Achara v'lo klum. So we'll say, what's the case over here? The case over here is where a person is making 2 statements, and essentially the second one contradicts the first. What is he saying? If my wife gives birth to a boy first, it'll be 200 zuz. And Nekeva, nothing. Nekeva Tchila, mana. Zachar Achareh, mana. Right? She gives birth first to a girl. Right, then it's a mana, and Zachar afterwards it's a mana. What happens? V'yolda Zachar Nekeva. Now this woman, right, gave birth to a boy and a girl. What's the problem? V'lo yadinan hey menau nafik bereisha. We just don't know which one was birthed first. And obviously, again, it's going to have ramification out to the financial award. Zachar, so the Gemara says, so what do we do? So Zachar shakal mana mimanav shach. So the Zachar, he'll take a mana regardless, right? Because either way, whatever the order was, he wasn't entitled to a mana. Idach manahu mamna mutal b'safek. The cholkin, the other mana, is mutal b'safek. We're not sure who's entitled to it. So we'll say, so remember again, what do you do with mamna mutal b'safek? What do you do with that? So we know this. First of all, what do you do with this? This is the famous machlokes, Sumchus and the Rabbanon, right? Sumchus says, the Rabbanon say, Yachloku. So Mamana Muta Basafek, Cholkin. Vahad, the Gemara says, Cholkin, say for the other money we go ahead and we divide it. The Gemara says, Vahad Sanya, Yalda Zachar Unikeva. Yalda Zachar Nekeva. Eino Ella Mana. But we learn in the Brisa that if you give birth to a Zachar Nekeva, there's only a Mana. Seichin Meshkachasla. What's that case? Also, we're just trying to figure out this Brisa. A little bit sidetracked over here. Ravina said, no, what's the case? What's the case? The case ultimately again is b'mevasreini, where the husband ultimately again, the father is not talking about the birth of a son versus the birth of a daughter. Rather, what is the father talking about? Whoever informs me about the birth of my child, I will give them this financial reward. In other words, you bring me this good news, I'll go ahead and give you this reward. Look at the Rashbam, last Rashbam before I turn the page. Mevasreini lo hisna lo says lezachar ulenakeva klum el mevaser. So the case is actually not where the father is not giving any money to the son of the daughter. Rather, again, he's giving money to the person who brings him the news. Let's go to Amud Beis. So I'll say interesting case here. Desanya, we learned as follows. We learn Hamivasreni bima nifta rachma shal ishti. So Reuven is having his first child with Rachel. He's very excited, and he says, "Whoever comes and tells me about what my wife has, right, I will go ahead and give him money." Apparently, he's a little old school, right? He's not there in the hospital with his wife. Whatever, he's doing whatever he's doing, right? So the mice again, whoever comes and tells me about what my wife had, im zachar yital mana. If someone comes and tells me that I have a son, I'll give him. The him is not the son. Rather, who is the him? The him is ultimately the person, the bearer of the good news. Im zachar yital mana. Yolda zachar notal mana. Okay, so therefore again, halacha l'maisa. So again, Reuven made this declaration. Whoever tells me that my wife had a son, I'll give him a mana. Right? So if he goes ahead, if Rachel gives birth to a son, and someone comes and tells Reuven will give him mana. Then the keva mana, or what if Reuven says, you know what, if my wife gives birth to a girl, right, I will go ahead and give that person a mana. So therefore, yaldin a keva no to mana. So halacha l'maaseh again, if she gives birth to a girl, so ultimately again you give a mana. Yalda zachar unikeva. Mazel tov, right? Rachel gives birth to twins. She gives birth to a boy and a girl. Eino ela mana. So in this case over here, so again, the bearer of the good news is very excited. He thinks he's going to get 2 manas over here, masayim. So Allah said, no, he only gets 1 mana. Ay v'ha zachar unekeva. Says Vaha Zachar Unekeva lo Amar the Amar Nami im Zachar Unekeva Nami Yital Mana. No, he said, in other words, Reuven made a provision for this also. Whether it's a boy or a girl, or a boy and the girl, I'm capping the good news fee at 1 mana. So Mar says, okay, so what exactly are you trying to teach in all of this? Right? So what are you trying to convey? In other words, I know this sounds like a pretty straightforward case. If you come and tell my wife had a boy, I'll give you mana, and he has a boy, she has a boy, gets a mana. If you come and tell my wife has a girl, I'll give you a mana. If it's a boy and a girl, I'm only going to give you 1 mana. Okay, so what's the chiddush? So Rabbi says it's very interesting. So the case it comes to exclude is what happens if someone comes and tells Reuven, your wife miscarried. Right? Or she gave birth to a stillborn. So in this case over here, someone is going ahead and telling Reuven what happened, but again, the news is not good. In that case, Reuven would not be obligated to pay the money. In other words, the idea in this kind of case is Reuven is excited about the news, and therefore the fee is associated again with the delivery of positive news. Should the messenger come with bad news, Reuven is not paying anything. Okay. Let's go weiter. So the Gemara says, "Hahu de amarla ledvisu nechasi lahai de me'abras." Okay, so we'll say. So now we're going to come to a case now, which is gonna loop back to our Mishnah. Reuven is married to Rachel, right? Rachel is pregnant. Reuven says, "I'm going ahead and giving my property to the child with which you are pregnant." To which you are pregnant. So the Gemara says, so now remember what's happening over here. He is now. By the way, whatever this case is, right? This could be a shchivnera gift, or this could be a gift of a bari, right? That maybe he's doing through a third party, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. The point, however the mechanics need to work, he is assigning his estate. He's giving a gift to his unborn child. So the shaila becomes now the Amar Rav Huna have mazaki l'uber, v'mazaki l'uber lo kana. Rav Huna says this doesn't work. This doesn't work. Because again, what's happening over here? So Reuven is assigning a gift to a fetus. And you cannot assign a gift to a fetus. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. This is the last like 4 lines of the thin lines of the Rashbam. Zakil uber al yedei acher lo kana ad sheyulad va'afilu heichad da amar nechasai laha uber kisheyulad damar afunu lekaman akshay lekana. So we'll say so it doesn't work. Again, we'll see why it doesn't work in just a moment, right? But Rav Huna says you can't assign a gift to an ubar. Well, we'll discuss why, and therefore the gift doesn't work. So let's analyze. Eisvei Rav Nachman Rav Huna. So Rav Nachman raised the kasha with Rav Huna. Ha'omer im yalda ishti zachar yital mana, yalda zachar yital mana. What do you do with our Mishnah? Our Mishnah is exactly this. Our Mishnah is assigning a gift to a fetus, right? Rachel's pregnant. Reuven says to her, if you give birth to a boy, I'll give him a mana. But Pasha's giving him a mana. So you're assigning a gift to an ubar, and yet it works. To which, interestingly enough, Rav Huna responded, says, Amar Le, he said to him, Mishnah Seinu, Anu Eini Yodea Mishnah. Now Rav Huna said, I don't know. I don't know whose opinion this is, because Rav Huna himself says, at least, I don't think this works. So I'm not exactly sure who is espousing this opinion. Rabbi Meir, so we'll say, okay, I can tell you who it is. It's Rabbi Meir. What does Rabbi Meir hold? Rabbi Meir holds that literally, again, I both say, now let's be clear, we actually had this just a couple of days ago. Rabbi Meir holds that you could go ahead and convey ownership over something that does not yet exist. To which the Gemara says no. So maybe it's Rabbi Meir who says that you could give something over to an Uber. No, that's not true. Why? Emer the Shabbos Rabbi Meir ledavar sheyeshna ba'olam ledavar she'ena ba'olam misham. Say, boss, we just had this. But it says no. Even Rabbi Meir says that you could convey ownership over something, over an object that doesn't yet exist. But according to Rabbi Meir, what does have to exist? What has to exist? What has to exist? The recipient. The recipient. In other words, you can't convey something over to someone who doesn't yet exist. The Uber doesn't exist. The Uber doesn't exist. And I both say, it's not totally true. In other words, the Uber does exist, but as an entity, there's an entity that could acquire something. The Uber does not exist. So therefore, again, even Rabbi Meir, who holds Adam Makna Davar Shalab Ali Olam, would agree that you cannot convey ownership to an Uber. So what's going on over here? So we'll say, so again, so remember, we have the statement of Rav Huna, right? So Rav Huna is telling us that Allah Chalamayim Mizaka Uber ain't a kone, lo kone. You try to convey ownership of something to an Uber, it is not going to work. The problem is, it contradicts our Mishnah, because our Mishnah seems to indicate that you can convey ownership of something to an Uber. So we're trying to figure out whose opinion is it. Rabbi Yossi. Maybe it's Rabbi Yossi. Maybe our Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi. What does Rabbi Yossi say? The Amar Uber Kani. Rabbi Yossi holds that an Uber does have the ability to acquire something. Okay, so now let's analyze this. Where does Rabbi Yossi say this? Disnan. Uber posel the inomachal de Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so let's start with this just a moment. Take a look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam does a beautiful job here of just framing this case. This is in the widest lines. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 lines up from the bottom. Let's take a look at this because it's important for our ensuing discussion. This nan. Beparak almana bi'avamis. So listen to this. Bas Yisrael sheni says the coin. So we'll say, remember again, normally, a Bas Yisrael marries a coin. What's the halacha when a Bas Yisrael marries a coin? What's the halacha? She's entitled to eat truma. What happens if her husband dies and they don't have any children together? What's the halacha? She can't eat truma. Okay, she can't eat truma. So watch this. So what happens? So we'll call her, Rachel was married to Reuven, and let's assume for our purposes right now, Reuven was a Kohen. Fine, so when he's alive, she's eating truma. Now he dies, umeis, v'nichamu beres. And unfortunately, when he died, she was pregnant. So Rachel's pregnant. What's the halacha? So we'll say, so now, just we're going out to set a little of a different direction over here. In the estate that Reuven left behind, and let's assume for a moment right now, that Rachel is the sole inheritor, right? So now, when the estate that Reuven left behind, so there are avadim. Now remember again, normally your servants also eat truma. Servants also eat truma, right? The Kinyan Kesef also eats truma. So what happens? So now Reuven died, Rachel inherits the estate, right? Or he gifted her the estate, whatever it might be. She dies, and she's pregnant. In the estate are avadim. What's the halacha? Lo yuchlu avadeh b'truma b'pnei chelko shel ubar. So this is fascinating. The avadim can't eat truma at this time because of the ubar, because of the fetus. Okay, now let's play that out. Kid mefarish hasam the ubar b'mai zara zarhu. This is incredible. A non-Kohanic woman, when she is pregnant, that fetus has her status. Therefore, it's a non-Kohen. Now, fascinatingly enough, when it's born, what is it going to be? It's going to be a Kohen. So we'll say, by the way, this is fantastic Shabbos table trivia, right? When can you ever have a child that at a certain point is a non-Kohen and then transitions ultimately again to becoming a Kohen? And the answer is in a situation of a non-Kohanic woman who marries a Kohen. When she is pregnant, that baby is a Zar. Now, again, I will say, normally, you'll say to yourself, who cares? Like, it doesn't really matter what the designation of the kid is in utero, except when it does. So, right? So ultimately, again, when the mother is pregnant, the baby is a zar. So watch this. Get ready for this. Because the baby is a zar, right? Because baby is a zar. Now remember, again, that baby has a chelik in the estate, which means that those avadim are partially owned by a non-Kohen. The fact that they're partially owned by a non-Kohen prevents the Avadim from going ahead and eating Truma. Now, even before we go on anymore, what do you see from here? What do you see from here? That an Uber does acquire. That an Uber does acquire. According to Rabbi Yossi, the fact that Rachel is pregnant and in utero, that child is a zar, and that child owns part of the estate, therefore precludes the Avadim from going ahead and eating Truma. So you see, Rabbi Yossi holds that an Uber does acquire. Okay, so let's finish up the rest of that. Finish up this. Such a fascinating case. Sha'uber posel ve'ino machal Rabbi Yossi. Kilomar sha'uber shenis abra Yisraelis mikoin baila shemes posel es ha'eved melechol b'truma. So now again, the fetus that Rachel has, right, she conceived from Ruvain the Kohen, is considered to be a zar. When it's, I'm saying now why that is, we're not getting into today. We're just taking that face value, Rabbi Yossi, that it is. So now the presence of that fetus precludes the avodim from eating truma, because ultimately a fetus of a non-Kohanic woman while in utero is considered to be a non-Kohen. Because ultimately, again, that baby is only considered to be a Kohen when he's birthed. When he's birthed, furthermore, again, I will say, so number one, interestingly enough, the presence of that fetus will preclude the avodim that are part of the fetus's father's estate from eating truma, because the fetus in utero is considered to be like a zar, non-Kohen. Therefore, again, a non-Kohen owns part of those avodim. Therefore, again, there's not complete Kohanic ownership of avodim, therefore they can't eat. Not only that, but the presence of the uber doesn't allow the mother to eat the truma either. Right, forget about, right. So in other words, even not forget about, but in addition to the avodim, the fact that the mother is carrying a child from a Kohen doesn't entitle her to eat truma until she births that child, and now she has actual Kohanic offspring. Because while that child is in utero, that child is a non-Kohen. He goes on, the kaimalan hasam shachelis b'truma b'shvil b'na Kohen kilo baila Kohen chai. A woman who has a Kohanic son is entitled to eat truma just like a woman who has a Kohanic husband. Kidichsiv v'yilid beis ahim yochlu b'lachmo aval uber lo. This really Rabbi Yossi uber b'ma'izara zarhu. Rabbi Yossi holds that when a woman who is married to a Kohen, right now, let's say she's widowed. When that child is in utero, that child does not have the status of a Kohen. Only once it's birthed does it have the status of a Kohen. So we'll say, so now again, this is fascinating by itself, but for our purposes, let's go back for just a second. So the Gemara says over here, I'm sorry. So maybe again, so we'll say, so remember again, what are we trying to figure out? We have Rav Huna who says that if a father gifts his estate to his unborn child, the gift doesn't work because uber lokona, a fetus can't acquire. Why? Because even according to Rabbi Meir who says, Davar Shalom Bali Olam, you can be making Davar Shalom Bali Olam, you still need a viable living recipient. The uber doesn't satisfy those criteria. But again, our Mishnah indicates that you can make a gift to the uber. So who is that? It must be Rabbi Yossi. Which Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi by the pregnant Kohanic widow, right? Who ultimately, again, the presence of that child who in utero is considered to be like a zar will preclude the avodim in the estate from eating truma. So what do you see from here? That an uber does have the ability to acquire. So the Gemara says, This non uber posel ve'ino machil. Right, when Rachel was pregnant, so posel, the presence of that uber, the existence of that uber, who's treated like a zar, will prevent the avodim from eating truma ve'ino machil, and he doesn't entitle his mother to eat truma either. Rabbi Yossi. So which the Gemara says no, but this is different. Shiny Yerusha haba me'eleha. Yerusha is different. Why is Yerusha different? I will say because Yerusha occurs on its own, right? This is not really a gift. This is not a gift. Yerusha is something that ultimately it's a what's the right word? It's a reaction, right? Yerusha is a reactionary conveyance. Father dies, that triggers the process of Yerusha. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. So ultimately, again, I will say it's quite possible that maybe an uber has the ability to go ahead and acquire Yerusha. Why? Because Yerusha is almost something that is foisted upon the individual, right? In other words, there's no hakna, there's no active conveyance that occurs by Yerusha. It is just a de facto conveyance, it's a de facto reality, as opposed to these other keys of gifts. So maybe the chiluk is like this: you can't be maknes something to an uber. right? That you can't do because there's no one to receive it. But perhaps by Yerusha, an Uber can acquire because halacha l'maisa, it occurs by itself. Okay. V'leima Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroki. Maybe it's Rabbi Yochanan. Sorry. V'leima Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroki. The Amar lo shna Yerusha v'lo shna matana. Maybe it reflects Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, because Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka does not make a distinction between Yerusha and matana. This now we learned. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka Omer. Im Amar Ami Sharai Liyarsho Dvarav Kayaman. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka said that if halacha l'maisa, a person made the statement ultimately again regarding someone who was fit to inherit him, Dvarav Kayaman. Ultimately it works. To which the Gemara says, Emer Deshamas Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka L'davar Sheyeshna Ba'olam. Again, we can make the same thing before. When does Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka say that works? When there is a proper recipient. But if there's no proper recipient, the Gemara says, but when there's no proper recipient in this world, the Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka make that statement. Again, we kind of like wind up in space with Rabbi Meir, to which the Gemara says, I'm sorry, Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, the Savala Rabbi Yossi. Maybe he holds like Rabbi Yossi. Mi Yemer de Savala. So who says that he holds like Rabbi Yossi? So again, why not frame the case differently? Instead of getting hung up that this is a case of someone being makar something to an Uber, one who said before. You're right. The person is not making a gift to the Uber. Who is he making a gift to? To the person who brings him the news. Here's the problem. Ihachi diktani seifa v'im ein sham yoresh ella hu yoresh hakol. You know what the seifa says? If there is no one else but this person to inherit, he inherits everything. He inherits everything. To which the Gemara says, here's the problem. So if we're talking about again someone who is giving the news, then the Gemara says Yoresh Mayavidite. Why does the Brisa use the lashon of Yerusha? There's no discussion of Yerusha. Maybe we're talking about a case where the mother births the child already. In other words, maybe this is not a case of conveyance to an Uber, but rather, again, it's the case of conveyance to an actual living child. So again, trying to the Gemara says, at the end of the day, if that's the case, then why frame it as whatever my wife will birth? If it's a case ultimately, again, of where the wife already gave birth, then it should say Kol sheyolda ishti mibayla. So we're going to stop over here for today. I'm leaving you a little bit like mid, but it's a nice break at the end of the daf. Not really a break, but in the middle. So I'll say, so again, trying to figure out a number of different things, but the primary overarching question. So specifically, we're trying to figure out how to read the brisa. But Lamaisa, how to read the brisa is fundamentally tethered to the issue of whether or not an Uber has the ability to go ahead and acquire. Here's what we know. We know for sure someone says it can. How do we know that? Our Mishnah, right? Because the Mishnah is talking about a case of a man who conveyed ownership of something to an Uber. So someone, somewhere, says that is possible. The shaila is, again, who is that particular opinion? And then again, by extension, halacha l'maisa, how do we actually paskin? Meretz Hashem resolution tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, Chem Razim, have a great day, everyone.